So let me tell you about the Canadian house hippo. This like pygmy version of the hippopotamus called the house hippo. Kind of like the rats in New York, it like lives in closets in people's buildings and survives on the crumbs of peanut butter on toast. It's dryer lint to build its nests, and they're adapted to Canadian climates and environments.
Weird.
And then the ad goes, "That looked really real, didn't it?" It was a message from concerned children's advertisers. And the whole point was, don't believe everything you see. Don't believe everything just because it seems real.
Welcome to Hypercast.
Welcome to Hypercast.
I'm Melissa, an ADHD coach and educator.
I'm Brianna, an ADHD coach and intern therapist.
Today we're going to talk about ADHD misinformation.
Some information that you're going to receive about ADHD is fake. Don't listen to everyone. Review your sources. Don't just take things at face value. See whether the study was done correctly or the information you're getting is from a credible source.
First, let's talk about misinformation in general. There are 3 general types of misinformation. So there's misinformation, which is information falsely represented out of context, or maybe someone doesn't fully understand, but that information is false. Misinformation is false information that is not intended to be false. Someone may give something out of context or from their own life experience, but that may not mean it is a universal truth. Disinformation is information spread with the intent to give false information, to actually cause harm. Malinformation is when someone takes something intentionally out of context in a negative way.
For example, all the people selling beauty products but use filters on their faces, right? They're trying to sell you a lie, and we're just supposed to believe it and then get really upset when the skin cream they're selling doesn't make our skin perfect.
Yes.
Incorrect information can be harmful. So if someone is saying something about ADHD, like medication, for example, that could prevent you from getting medicated if you needed to be on that. If someone is saying, this is how I got a diagnosis, or this is what ADHD is, and if you don't have this trait, then you don't have ADHD, that can also be harmful for preventing you from getting a diagnosis. And then the flip side of that as well, of if someone is trying to convince you that you do have ADHD when you don't, right? Like co-opting common traits of all people to be specifically ADHD traits or specifically autism traits, and then gatekeeping information or the community or support through sometimes malicious means and sometimes just misinformed.
You and I were talking about a scientific study, and there have been people that had taken that study and taken things out of context and spread them throughout the internet. And then it spreads to the next person, it spreads to the next, and then it becomes like internet fact, when that's not the true intention of the original study.
Exactly. Should we talk about the harms of this?
Yeah, let's talk about the harms of it. There's this pattern on ADHD boards online. Someone would be like, I stub my toe every 3rd Thursday. That must be ADHD. And then someone else chimes in, I also stub my toe every 3rd Thursday. It is not ADHD specific.
If something is different about you and you're being bullied or discriminated against and you're looking for a community and you feel like you fit in with a community only to find out later that that wasn't accurate for you, it can be really devastating.
Yeah.
And in the same vein, mischaracterizing ADHD, for example, like laziness, lack of discipline, made up condition, like the vaccines cause autism, that's a huge example of misinformation. It's perpetuating stigma. It's perpetuating discrimination. It's preventing people from getting the care that they need. And it's doing actual physical harm to people's mental and physical health and well-being. It can be really harmful if you don't know how to distinguish what is and what isn't real.
There was this study done on TikTok videos specifically that are about ADHD. The 100 videos selected were those that described or provided information about ADHD, such as symptoms, diagnosis, management, or lived experiences. The main results were that 52% of the TikTok videos were misleading, 27% were personal experience, and 21% were deemed helpful. Most of the misleading videos attributed transdiagnostic symptoms as being specific to ADHD. That's the part I was talking about. There are things that can be attributed to multiple things, depression, anxiety, etc., that, yes, they may apply to ADHD, but they may apply to more than one thing.
That's probably why there's a lot of confusion between ADHD and ASD right now, because a lot of people are just coming into an autism diagnosis because previously you weren't allowed to have both diagnoses simultaneously. A lot of people were ADHD and attributing autism traits to ADHD or ADHD traits to autism, and now there's a confusion of where that line is. And if you're trying to get a diagnosis for one or the other, it can be very confusing.
I'm going through this as well, and I'm still trying to piece what's what. Odd HDers will feel like there's two parts of yourself. And for me, it was realizing that there was a place where my ADHD ended and there was still something left over. Like there was something that wasn't the ADHD. And I'm like, what is this piece? What do I do with it?
Yeah. Talking about the delayed diagnosis and treatment, if there is misinformation, it lends itself to confusion. How would you bring that information to your doctor or care provider? On the flip side, it's also undermining trust in medical professionals. If you are certain that you have this thing based on what you've seen on the internet, you go to your medical professional and they're like, no, you don't have that, you have this instead, or you have this other thing or that. Yes, there's a lot of problems with the medical system, and they don't understand ADHD or autism either, and they're more likely to diagnose, especially women, with anxiety or depression. But they still have gone to medical school, and their opinion should still be respected if they're, competent and respecting you and using an ADHD or a neurodiversity affirming lens. This is another point of misinformation. Even medical professionals, even us, like both of us, we are ADHD experts, can still have personal bias impact. We're never going to intentionally misinform. But as we learn more and as we grow, we might learn that some opinions we have previously based on science have changed, or the science has been updated, or the age of the video, who is speaking, what is their education, what is their background.
To understand that in this neurodiversity space, the science is actually moving quickly because there are so many studies being done. So like you're saying, make sure to look at the date. Even things from 2 years ago may not be the current science that needs to be paid attention to.
Absolutely. I don't want people to stop. All of this ADHD content is bringing awareness to ADHD. It is helping people find a community. Like the 21%, the personal stories that were so popular, of course they're popular. Personal experiences. Oh my God, I have that too. I can relate. It's so validating to have that out there and not feel alone and not feel broken.
Yes. You brought this up a little bit, but self-diagnosis is a thing. Finding stories that you identify with is important. But having a professional, talking to a professional is important as well, because how many of us, I would say 80%, have a comorbid mental health issue, such as anxiety or depression.
I say that as an accurate statistic, but check that statistic. Research, Google it,
research.
Find out whether or not we are lying to you.
There's something important about talking to a medical health professional, because you may have ADHD, you may not, but treating the whole of you is very important.
So I'm absolutely on board with that. Self-diagnosis is valid. Peer review, also a valid diagnosis. We're even starting to develop diagnostic tools that are based on self-report because of the incredible wait times and the lack of understanding in the medical community. But they are starting to become valid tools for self-diagnosis, which is amazing. However, you can't get the support you need, i.e. medication or counseling or whatever, without going to talk to someone else, right? You can't TikTok your way out of whatever problems you're having as a result of your neurodivergence, right? If you need further support, you then must go talk to a professional.
The reason why we wanted to talk about this today, because Brianna was spamming me earlier this week with a bunch of stuff from
spamming you with love.
Spamming me with love. A bunch of things about ADHD. One thing she sent to me was an ADHD coach that was talking with great confidence about something. And not everything they said was 100% true. And yes, there were things that you could resonate with what information was given. But there were things I felt were misleading. And I feel like that's dangerous.
Especially coming from an expert, right? Like the people sharing their stories, you learn to trust and respect them. But if someone is coming on here being like, this is my job, this is my profession, and this is fact as she was presenting it, it can be harmful. But also, I don't think there was any intention of malice there, because I do believe that she was talking about her own experience. I believe that she is telling her truth. But that's not our truth as
a whole.
As a whole, as ADHDers.
Let's talk about good content. How do you know what content's good? Part of it is that it's likely science-backed.
Yeah. So I have a whole list here. Check the source. Who is speaking? Verify their credentials. Go check out our websites. We sound really confident. check the source, look for authority, verify credentials, look for red flags, cross-check the information. Are multiple sources saying this information is true?
Oh,
Consistency.
yes. Consistency.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know about you, Brianna, but when I was a youngster in school, it was common knowledge is considered 3 resources that say the same thing. We're talking valid resources. What is a valid resource, Brianna? You're a researcher.
I am a scientist, yes. If
Yeah.
this is from ADHD facts with a Z .com and
Or
the
from Wikipedia.
website is like Comic Sans,
Yes.
written by some guy named Jeff,
Yes.
then maybe not as prestigious as like Psychology Today. When you were doing scientific research, someone has done the research. Someone has verified that you've done the research correctly and done it again to ensure the results you got the first time happened again. That is the gold standard for what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And then it would be from a reputable source like a newspaper.
If you're looking for websites, .edu are going to be resources from educational major universities doing scientific research. .org are going to be nonprofit organizations that maybe actually have input in that space. And .gov is government-backed resources. Are there quick ways to do this? Because I may not have time to go read a full study on something to verify that it's honest and truthful.
Well, yeah, so that goes to the rest of my list. Evaluate the agenda. Is the person trying to sell you something? Is the person trying to use fear, anger, or emotional reactions to provoke something? And then verifying links and citations. Don't click on links. People with ADHD, because of our impulsivity, because of some of the traits that are associated with ADHD, we are more susceptible to scams, to manipulation, to being gaslit, which can lead to like abuse situations. There are fact-checking websites. So if you don't know, you can put it in and they'll label stuff for you, which is really helpful.
Are you talking like Snopes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Factcheck.org is another one. And then
Okay.
check the source. Are they an authority? Verify their credentials. Are they trying to sell you something?
We're selling things to people, like our services.
Yeah. No, I'm saying to check us. That's the point of this thing. Like, I don't want to be exempt from this. But if they're trying to sell you like snake oil, or like, oh, I have the cure for your ADHD, like we're not selling a cure because it
So you love those Instagram ads for all those vitamins that are going to cure your ADHD?
got recalled because they were causing like medically severe diarrhea.
Wow.
You remember that?
Medically severe diarrhea from. I get pissed off. I get so pissed off because, like you were saying, a lot of people with ADHD can be duped, or we want to trust people. Search on YouTube. I'm like, what's YouTube saying about this? They're like, the myths about ADHD. And I'm like, oh, that's so going to get clicks. But how helpful is it? There are so many myths out there about ADHD, of course, but they grow every day.
What?
And how do we combat against that?
Okay. What myths about ADHD?
I have no idea. There's like 25 billion videos out there with
Okay.
50,000 views.
Because here's the thing that immediately makes me wary, right? Like trusting our instincts, was we were just talking about, like myths about ADHD. I want to know what lens they're coming from. When I am looking for ADHD content, I am immediately searching for, are you viewing this from the lens that you should be? So, i.e., ADHD affirming, like we are not disabled, we don't need a cure, we're not broken. There are parts of disability that disable us, right? And we're not superheroes either. So immediately when I see what are the myths about ADHD, I'm thinking, what are you talking about? Like, are you coming at this from the medical lens of like your inattention, your focus, that's all a problem that we have to fix about you?
But human beings, they want to click on that. They want to know what's wrong with them. They want to know what they're missing out. They want to know why they're being lied to.
Watch it for entertainment purposes, but not for education purposes.
But they take it as education. That's the point.
So don't. I've solved the problem, guys. Don't.
Please be like Brianna, this scientifically minded, lovely human who takes nothing at face value except for peer-reviewed science.
Even that I don't take at face value for alternative sources. I mean, it's like the curiosity in me, I suppose. But what is that phrase? I wouldn't take criticism from someone if I wouldn't take advice from them.
But for those who aren't you, because you are a pinnacle at this research thing, right?
Nothing ever passes by me.
But for the 15-year-old girl out there that thinks she may have ADHD, or has recently got a diagnosis. These things are real, you know?
I'm not even concerned about them, though. I'm not even concerned about them. I'm concerned about everyone else who doesn't have lived experience, who can't know that that's bullshit, right? So I'm worried about the other people who are like, "Oh, the myths of ADHD," and it gets clicked on.
But there are
Maybe
legitimate sources that title things that way.
I'm concerned about society believing these things and continuing to not understand ADHD, continuing the discrimination, the stigma, all of that, because there is misinformation out there. There is harm that is being done to us as a community due to people believing stuff that they shouldn't be.
Do you think it's harming the people who have ADHD and they're getting the wrong information about themselves?
No, it absolutely is harming them. I'm just saying that it's more likely that they're going to be like, that doesn't feel like my lived experience, and be able to take it with a grain of salt rather.
I see that people flood to these sources, even if they're not 100% true, and they start identifying with it. It's some sort of confirmation bias, and they start throwing comments at it and start throwing likes at it. And that's where I'm really concerned.
So, like, engagement making false information more popular just because it's
Yeah.
flashy.
Yeah. That Psychology Today thing I was just reading, most of the things that have gone out on TikTok about ADHD aren't factual. Only 21% of it's useful.
Useful in what way?
I questioned that too. Lived experience and self identification is useful.
I would say that it is. I would say that the lived experience and the validating and community aspect of that is more useful than just straight information.
I'm with you. I love if that validation is also sprinkled with some really good information too. That's why we're doing what we're doing.
The point of this podcast is edutainment, education and entertainment, right? Like, we're trying to bring
Yeah.
understanding. We're trying to bring information to those who might not be able to get it from another source, but with the lens that is affirming. But also, like, this is
Yeah.
also entertainment. This isn't a conversation with your doctor. None of this is actionable unless it triggers self-reflection. It's not supposed to change who you are. It's just supposed to be like, "Oh, I didn't know that before. I would like to go research that further. I'd like to understand more about that."
But my problem is that the majority of people don't take that step.
Well, can't help you.
I know.
I
I mean, this is a really big topic. I think it's bigger than what we thought when we brought it to the table. But what's the good news? What's the good news? We've dug ourselves a negativity hole.
Yeah, I am in a negativity hole. I'm feeling really discouraged about the state of the world and the fact that misinformation exists, and I try and have this positive view that people are capable of understanding and learning and growing. That some people are doing this maliciously. Like, we talked a
Yeah.
lot about people who aren't doing this maliciously, who are just sharing information and maybe not fully understanding it. But there are people out there that are actually trying to hurt you and to scam you or us.
Malinformation.
That's also terrifying.
If someone is trying to dupe you into buying products like vitamins and things that haven't been fully researched, that's a problem.
But they prey on desperation, right? If you're so desperate as to reach out for this help, you probably don't have another option.
On social media platforms, there are creators that are creating things. We're one of them, creating things from the ADHD life perspective point of view that are really enlightening. People are finding a place to connect and identify. Some people, just by seeing these things online, are able to get a diagnosis. There's been a lot of women who they've seen something online and they've go, oh, wait, that's me. And then they go talk to their doctor.
Hey, you found the positive again. Good job, Melissa. The social media piece of people sharing their stories is so important because it brings more awareness. And all we're stating with this episode is to be careful. Don't take everything at face value just because you see it online from someone who seems to be an expert or seems to be trustworthy. Trust yourself, do your own research. And I say that with a grain of salt because some people do their own research against scientific consensus, which
Mhm.
just because you don't believe something to be true doesn't make it not true.
Don't
Both
just
sides.
seek out confirmation bias when you're doing research.
It is so helpful to have information because it helps so many people. be careful of the
Yeah.
information that is out there that is not aimed at helping. I don't want us to be excluded from this. Validate this information. Anything that you've learned here, see if another source validates it. We claim to be experts.
But as experts, we have responsibilities too. That means we need to constantly be looking and reading and learning. We may not be 100% all the time. Maybe we misspeak, and that's unintentional. We do our best to continue our own education on what's happening in this neurodiversity space.
Today's episode was on ADHD and misinformation. We talked about what kinds of misinformation are out there. We talked a little bit about how to recognize and avoid misinformation. And we talked about the benefits of just some information being out there in general and the helps and harms that information can provide. So if you are looking for more ADHD information, listen to our podcast and Google some other ADHD resources.
We do offer support. If you're needing ADHD coaching support, you can reach me at likemindcoaching.com.
I can be found at understandingadhd.ca.
We'll put a couple of resources in the show notes that we lean on when we're looking for good information, because we know it's hard to validate sources, to find the right places to get the right information about what's going on with us. Well, thank you for joining us, and until next time, bye.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, tap or click right here, or find the link in the show notes for the episode that we did on ADHD assessments.